All right. How are we?
Are we up? We're live.
I think we are. I think
We'll,
we
we'll see
lost
how long this
everyone, though. We
lasts.
definitely lost everyone.
Well,
Well,
yeah, that's probably happens when you've got technical issues. I'm not sure. I'm not sure how we're gonna make it through. It's been a shit show all morning with
sure
the
has.
connection. I guess the bandwidth, so to speak, hasn't it?
Yeah.
So, well, how are you doing
Yeah.
today, Mr. Coffman? We'll just see. We'll just roll.
I, I'm, it's Friday. That's about all that I can say about today. Today is not going well. Not so far. I'm going to try and make it a better day. I'm actually, the wife and I are actually going to go out and do a little camping tomorrow. Get
Excellent.
out in this beautiful weather. But, no, man. I guess we have some introductions to do here. So, hey guys, welcome to another episode of the Creative Real Estate Investing Mastery Podcast. My name's Jeff Coffman. I'm joined by my partner and friend over here at Sub Two Empire, Mr. Ken Rossics. And guys, if you're rejoining us, we have had one heck of a morning with technology. So
Oh
it's like
goodness, yes.
it's unreal. It's like it's almost like somebody's
Well,
sitting in the background and they're just like fidgeting and messing with stuff. I don't get it. I don't get it. But
well,
okay,
I'm
well
fairly
we're
certain
here.
we've pissed off Skynet somehow. So,
Yeah,
yeah.
no kidding. No kidding. So, all right, let's get down to a little bit of business. We did have. Let me see if I can find this. Da, 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 da.
Yeah, follow up from last episode.
Yeah, yeah. There was a somebody actually put something had a question out there. I just don't remember what it was. And I had to shut my browser down and everything to reconnect. So let's just see. First of all, and delete that. That is deleted. Now that we had, where do you even find that? There we go. Comments. There we go. Well, actually, this was just a comment this guy had. It was he was talking about a video that we put out there actually quite a long time ago. I think this video is from like,
Oh, one of the older ones. Yeah, yeah, I saw that. Yeah.
yeah, it's like from like 2022. It says he's looking to buy pre-foreclosures in Virginia Beach from wholesalers. Uh, I don't know. I don't really have a comment on that, but other than good for you, man.
Yep.
Hopefully you can,
Go for it.
yeah, 100% go for it. But hopefully you can kind of steer yourself into going direct to seller. You know, Ken's favorite folks on the planet are wholesalers, and you know,
Yep. Well,
but
I've got a little an aside there about how greedy everyone is now. If you would like me to go to an aside, otherwise we can stay on
I
topic. That's
I
it.
really wouldn't. I really don't care. No. Um, so yeah, good for you, dude. Pre foreclosures is always something like. There's always this big question about, is it really worth marketing to certain lists or certain demographics, and certainly pre foreclosures has come under fire uh, in recent years just because we had such a boom there, and pre foreclosure inventory across the country um, was just at stupid low levels. So, but I always think that pre foreclosures are, first of all, I think they're some of the sweetest deals that you can get. Really,
Yeah, it can be
uh,
good. Yeah, it can be good deals for sure. Yeah.
I think we always recommend that folks they pick two channels at first. Especially if you're new, master those channels before you decide to jump into something else. But I would
Yeah.
say that pre foreclosures are one of those special case uh, types of lists, because it's you don't know. Even though, yes, inventory was low, the deals are so good, it still kind of makes sense to actually market for those, even if you've already got your two channels picked out. So I'd always kind of have those kind of burning in the background. because you just never know when you're going to come across a really good pre-foreclosure deal. And I don't know,
And this
usually
is going
there's
to be
somebody that. Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. Sorry, I'm still a little delayed here, so I apologize. I've probably been doing that all episode now. The uh, this is the first shameless plug, right? You're talking about marketing channels there too, and so pre-foreclosure falls under financial motivation, and so we have great marketing courses in there that we separate by different seller motivations, right? Financial motivation, personal motivation, etc. Very inexpensive, great material in there. Show you, as Jeff mentioned, show you how to get the list, how we get the lists, and use the list and all that stuff too. So sorry, shameless plug number one.
Yeah. Hey, can't hurt a thing. All right. So what are we going to talk about today, Ken?
Well, today we are continuing with our subject to series, our little series. We're going to do three in a row. This is 2 of 3 on the subject to. So today we thought we would dive a little bit. Now we referenced some of this last week, just as just to be fair, but we're going to take a deep dive into common subject to mistakes real estate investors make. Like a lot of real estate investors don't even get into the sub 2 or the creative stuff because they think it's too risky and all of this stuff. But we're going to talk about the common subject to mistakes. So just to reset things for those of us, right? Some people might have saw last episode, maybe they'll see this episode. What do we mean when we say subject to deal, Mr. Coffman? What do we say? Define subject to deal.
Okay. I have a different definition every single time you ask that question, by the way. But
that's why I ask it so much. It's just, yeah.
Okay. So let's simplify this as much as possible. Subject to is nothing more than taking over the debt on an existing mortgage. That's all you're doing. So you're assuming the debt. You're not assuming the mortgage. You're not assuming the loan. Actually, you're not going out and qualifying. You're not talking to a lender, submitting all of your tax documents, and I'm trying to be a little. I'm trying to be polite because working with lenders is like it's one of my least favorite things on the planet, really. It's kind of a necessary evil, but I don't. It's not my lane. All of that stuff, dealing with all the paperwork and all this. That's just not my lane. So, but I definitely digress there. But so subject to is nothing more than going out and building trust and rapport with a seller and taking over their mortgage debt. That's all that it is. So the debt stays in place. The property gets transferred into a new entity of your choosing. And then, you now own a property subject to. You just make those payments. Is that good enough for you?
Since you mentioned, right? Yeah. So right. And what you said there at the end too, right? When you're assuming the debt, what that really means is you're going to make the monthly payments, right? You're going to take over the payments on that loan. Like logistically, well, that's what it means. So they're going to become your responsibility as the new buyer. But you talked about, so we're using somebody else's loan, right? We're taking over, like we're using their credit to an extent, and we're going to assume the payments on the loan and all that stuff too. So this is right. We talked about risk last week. So that first common mistake, right, which is going to go back to a risk that we talked about last week, is lenders, right? They vetted the person, the borrower on their loan. They didn't vet you. So if the lender finds out about this, like what do they put in their paperwork that prevents this? Well, it's that DoOn Sale clause, right? So
that's right.
So a common mistake made is not understanding the DoOn clause. So just quickly again, what is that DoOn clause, and what's our number one, or what are the ways that we make sure that is not called by the lender?
Right. So brief definition of the DoOn Sale clause is it's nothing more than an acceleration clause, whereby if a property is transferred, if the deed to a property is transferred into another entity, regardless of what that entity is, or whether you own that entity or not, If it's transferred into another entity, you have just triggered the DoOn Sale clause. On the Garn-St. Germain Act of 1982, there are 9 exceptions to that rule or to that clause that would allow for an individual to actually transfer title into another entity or transfer the title. Is entity the right word? Is that what I'm looking for? I guess it would be. I mean, yeah, because
Yeah,
9 times out of 10,
trust is an entity. Yeah, you're.
Yeah. So I don't like to call a trust an entity. I like to call a trust a contract. A third-party contract, because I guess it could be an entity because it could get an EIN. You could have to go out and get an EIN for it.
It is.
Regardless, it's semantics, right?
I guess. Tax return too. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's what the DoOn Sale clause is. They have the right to accelerate that loan if that transfer is made without actually paying off that underlying debt that lender has provided to the borrower. So that is a DoOn Sale clause, and just to kind of recap last week a little bit, it all, just like anything else, this all starts with a good foundation. So what I'm referring to is actually the documentation that you use to to sort of keep the red flags from going up and triggering that DoOn Sale clause. And so, for instance, we like to use trusts to take title on subject to deals, and we do that because now, even though our trusts, our land trusts that we use, do not comply with the Garn-St. Germain Act, a trust is
technically don't comply. Technically,
correct.
Yes.
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah.
But in the eyes of a lender, a trust is a trust is a trust. They don't really know. They don't really. People transfer properties into trusts every single day, and it's very, very common. It's the most common transfer of title that we see, or that lenders are going to see at any time. It just happens so often, just for estate planning type of stuff. So technically, no, we don't. The land trusts that we use they are revocable trusts. We actually don't have a land trust statute here in our state, and there are only 6 states that do. And however, so we use just regular old revocable trusts. Very simple. I think ours is like a 13-page trust or something like that. I believe that's what it is.
Yeah,
it's a very simple trust.
It's like a
yeah. So it all starts, keeping this DoOn Sale clause at bay. It all starts with a good foundation of solid process and solid paperwork. That's where it all starts. The proper transfer of any property into, in our case, a trust. Now, you can do the same thing with an LLC. Actually, Fannie does have rules and guidelines now on transferring properties, investment properties, that is, from your personal name into an LLC, and they will allow that. But it technically still does trigger the DoOn Sale clause. It could do that. So, it sounds like a big bad, like it sounds super, super dangerous, but these transfers take place every day. I mean, it is so, so common, and most lenders just do not have someone like dedicated sitting in some back office dungeon somewhere, just out browsing around looking for these. Now they did it one time. Back in the early 80s, late 70s, early 80s, they actually had people, when interest rates were super high, they would call these notes due. They would accelerate these particular notes that had been transferred into another entity, and they would accelerate those notes, foreclose on those notes, so that they could go out and re-lend on those properties at much higher interest rates. It was diabolical, is what it was. It was just,
We call that predatory lending. predatory
lending.
lending. Yep, yep.
Yeah.
So now the environment, the environment for that lending, that predatory lending, right? The regulations, the Big Brother / the government has put in place is much more friendly to us, the consumer. So the chances of that happening now are pretty slim. Somebody from the lender going around and looking at the title changes. But what you said is very important too. So number one is you have to have an understanding of how you're going to take title and do that properly. What we suggest is to do that in a land trust, because the lenders see trusts all the time and understand that kind of transfer and don't really even question it, right? So that's like pro tip number one. Like you use a trust. That's why you use a trust. As you mentioned, though, you can do it in an LLC. It can be done in an LLC.
Yeah.
And the other thing too is once you do that, right? So you don't want your title issues to how you're taking title to put a red flag up. So that's number one. No red flags with your title. So understand and think about how you're going to take title to the property, right? And then the other thing is to make sure that the lender doesn't look at this DoOn Sale, or is it right? This is my favorite thing, Jeff. You know how I love this one. Just make the payments, stupid. Just make the monthly payments, right?
Yeah.
And so that they don't have any reason to question any of that. So
Yeah, and then the final one is probably less important, but certainly could put up could set off some alarms, and that is the insurance policy. Make sure your insurance policy is set up correctly. That's a very simple thing to do. It's not difficult, but it's something that must be done. That's another mistake that a lot of folks make is they try and find finagle the current insurance policy. They're not setting. Honestly, these lenders don't care as long as they are protected. It's that simple. If they're protected and the policy is set up correctly, you're going to be fine. It's not that big of a deal.
Yeah, it's not. Can we talk just a little bit more about this? I know we talked a little bit about this last week too. And by the way, there is an updated video about the insurance, especially if you're looking at doing it in a trust. Like that video is out there on our YouTube channel. So if you haven't already, if you're probably watching this on the YouTube channel, so you're probably already a subscriber. But if you're not, go out there and get that. It's very simple. And the lender, as you mentioned, Jeff, the lender wants to be protected. Well, they're called the loss payee on your insurance policy, right? Whatever you do, make sure that they stay the loss payee on your new insurance policy, and that the borrower is an additional insured. The borrower on your subject to mortgage is an additional insured. Like beyond that, they're gonna be pretty okay, and you have 16 other additional insureds or something. You're doing something a little weird with the policy, but other than that, you're gonna be pretty well set. So don't freak out about it.
Well, there are a lot of property management companies that demand being added as additionally insured on a policy. If it's an investment property, lenders are well aware that there could be there is the possibility of having other additionally insureds on a policy, and a very common one, like I said, is property management. A lot of your legitimate property management companies will demand that they be listed as additionally insured on those policies. So, but the insurance policy is really not that big of a deal. If you watch last week's episode, I talked about the only time, the closest I've ever come to having a loan, or at least raising a red flag. I've never had a loan called due, and I do attribute that to setting it up correctly. I really do. But the only time that I've ever, maybe started to initiate that red flag being raised was when I actually had a policy set up incorrectly. And all that lender did was they sent me a letter that stated, exactly how it should be set. They actually told me how it should be set up. So I'm just relaying that information to you now. I just learned that from a lender. That's pretty wild if you think about it. I learned how to set these up from a lender. So anyway, all right. So
which goes to say, I think we mentioned this last week. Sorry, my delay. Which goes to say that the lenders in today's environment don't want to call the notes due. They want the payments coming into their books, right? Hence,
they prefer
why they told you how to. Right. Right. So
Yeah.
just make the payment, stupid. But you mentioned the all that stuff too. But we're putting the cart before the horse a little bit too. Let's go back to, so we talked about the DoOn Sale and the common mistakes too. But let's go back maybe to an even more granular level. So you get a lead, like you're marketing for subject to deals, or you're very good at creating them, right? Subject to deals are created many times, and you're talking to the sellers. Well, one of the common mistakes is not vetting your seller properly. So let's go back. Let's go back to that. Like not only the seller, but the property itself. So let's talk a little bit about that too. So how a common mistake, not properly vetting your seller. What what do you suggest? What are our pro tips to properly vet those sellers, Mr. Coffman?
Well, I like to say that first of all, you should not. No one who's doing a subject to deal should be hard selling a seller on this idea, or in other words, they should. This is not a. It's not something that you want to convince a seller to do. It's really the way that it should be approached is that you have options that you're providing to the seller, and whatever those options might be. It might be it could be a short sale. If a seller's in financial trouble, you could recommend a short sale. I don't do short sales. I don't care for them. I just don't have the I don't think I have the stamina anymore to do short sales. They're just a total pain. But so it could be a short sale. That could be an option for them. It could be listing the property. A lot of times we're dealing with folks who just either maybe they're underwater, maybe they have maybe they would have to come to the closing table with some cash in their pocket to be able to close it, and a lot of times that just is not possible. And so what I'm trying to get at is providing them options and actually showing them what is possible in their particular situation. And so as it relates to subject to, if we get to that point where subject to is the only thing that makes sense, then at that point they already have the realization. They already see what needs to happen. So there's no selling these folks, and in fact it's quite dangerous if you ask me, because this is a subject to deal, at least in our world, is a long-term type of deal. We're going to try and hold on to that as long as possible if we can. I hold several subject to deals that I've made no arrangements or no agreements with the sellers to actually to pay that off, and we're fully transparent about that. But that's all part of the negotiation. It's not like that's a standard thing. In fact, we're doing a flip right now. That's a subject to deal, and we just couldn't get that. That seller just did not want to go long term, but she did agree to do short term and allow us to go in and put some cash into the property in a rehab, and we'll turn around and flip that property. So where was we going with that? I kind of rambled on.
Properly vetting the seller. And so what you're saying there is be transparent with the seller. Don't hard sell them on subject to being the only way. It is an option, and portray it as an option and provide options. But from the seller too, you want to make sure that risk last week. You also want to vet the seller a little bit too, like do your due diligence. Are there liens? Are there other liens against the property? Are they in foreclosure? Are there judgment liens against the, here in Missouri, we can look people up in the CaseNet system, like the judicial system, and see if there's liens and stuff against them. In other words, are they going to do? You have to have a subject to deal, Jeff. I'm going to steal your stuff. This is what you say. It's a rapport, relationship, trust deal between us and the sellers. And the sellers need to be able to do what they say, hold up their end, so to speak, too, and not screw you over. So you need to vet them properly too. So that's what we're suggesting there. But also what you said is exactly right, though. We need to be honest on our end. we can't be doing the same thing from the other end about being, less than transparent with how we're portraying things. So
Yeah, I consider this as like uh, it's like a Vegas wedding, like you're kind of rushing into something. Ken, I don't know if you can see this or not, but you're totally frozen right now. No, there we go. Okay. But it's reminiscent of a Vegas wedding. Like if you meet somebody one day, you head out to Vegas, you get married the next day, and you're supposed to live happily ever after. Although in this case, it's a little bit different because you are in this relationship. It is for as long as you have that property, you are in a quote partnership or a business marriage, if you will, with that seller. And so you do not want to lead off on the wrong foot. You want to have 100% complete integrity and transparency with these folks. And you would be surprised at just how far one of these sellers will go with you, just by being transparent and honest. It's incredible. And I think as far as it's a long-term relationship, and I think as long as you have those kind of those innate not abilities, but what's the word I'm looking for? Just those traits built in. Like if you're an honest person and you can be transparent with folks, that's 90% of the battle with these subject to deals. It really is. The rest of it's kind of procedural stuff. It's really very simple to do. The hard part is getting to a point where that seller ultimately says yes, and they become kind of your proxy partner in this thing. Although I will call it a non-operational partner, but they are. I mean,
yes, silent partner. We want them to be a silent partner.
Yeah, totally silent if
That's
possible.
right.
Yeah, but yeah.
Yes, that's great. That's correct. Until they want to go out and get a new loan, but that's a whole separate.
Yeah.
I just want to say too, from transparency, let's segue a little bit into transparency. So what I envision as transparency, or how I use transparency, is I verbally say to the sellers, here's what I'm going to do. Then I put it in writing in the documents. Here's what we talked about. Here's what I'm going to do. This is my agreement, right? So you already mentioned that is the documents. Have good documents. This is going to be shameless plug number 2. We have great documents that cover that CYA, cover your assets for subject to specifically. It does require a little additional paperwork, it's a fair amount of, I'll be honest, it's like a fair amount of paperwork. But once you understand how to do it, just like a trust, once you understand how to do it and you've done it a couple of times, it's just second nature, and you just have it in your repertoire. But that's what we mean by being transparent. Tell the seller what you're going to do, what's happening, how that's logistically going to occur, and then put it in writing in front of them. And by the way, like, it's okay to take time and go over said documents with the seller. Sit down and go over the documents with the seller. Like, that's okay. Don't expect them to read it on their own, right? They're not a real estate investor like you are, right? They're probably distressed, as Jeff mentioned, right? There's probably some kind of distress in their life at the moment too. And you're going to expect them to go through these documents and have any damn idea what it means. Like, take the time, rapport and trust with the seller, and show them what's going to happen, why it's going to happen, and how you're going to address and take care of things, right?
Yeah.
So
I want to add on to that though too, because
right, that's all we're saying.
Yeah. There is, I'm just going to kind of repeat a little bit about what you said. You were talking about how, you tell them what you're going to do, then you put it in writing, you put it down in a contract, or you put it on, you document it basically. That would even, let me just give you a scenario. Let's say that, because that's the best way I can explain this. Let's just say that you're talking to a seller, and inevitably one of the questions that's going to pop up is, well, how long are you going to have this loan out for? How long are you going to be paying on my loan? And 9 times out of 10, for me, that question is very, very tough to answer, because simply put, market conditions change constantly. So if I were to put in writing, in front of the seller, and I said, I will have this paid off. I will have this loan paid off in a year. Let's say that I said that. How do you know in a year's time? I mean, just imagine the real estate market we just came out of. That was just so bananas. I mean, it was great. We probably wouldn't have any problem selling that property in a year's time. But we're starting to see a little bit of things slowing up a little bit. We're starting to see that. So how am I to know in a year's time that I'm going to actually be able to perform? So one of those, what I really want to drive home is that, yes, you definitely need to be transparent, and you should be transparent with what I'm saying as well. But this would be one of those situations where I would say, hey, Mr. or Mrs. Seller, I really can't, I can't give you, I can give you an idea about when I have that, I would like to get that loan paid off, but I don't know exactly. And so therefore I'm probably not going to put that in writing for you, because I can't foretell the future. I just don't know what the market's going to look like when it comes that time. I may have to hold on to it. And I mean, as long as you're transparent like that, and as long as they know that ahead of time, then most of them, I mean, I've not had one. I may have lost a couple of deals because of that, but I've not had someone go, just totally blow up and lose their minds over it. But it's just being transparent, and it's just more trust. It's just more trust and rapport that you're able to build with the seller at that point. So I just wanted to throw that out there. But I do want
That's
to
an excellent
pull this back. Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Did I cut in? Sorry. Boy, the connection is just for today, isn't it? I just want
it's awful.
to point out to that excellent point. Don't put things in your contract. Don't put things in writing. Like if you don't feel like, if you don't know for a fact that you can't do that, I've mentioned, that's the perfect example. It's just like, when are you going to dispose of the property, right? Your exit strategy, which we're going to talk about here in a second. What's your exit strategy? Like, if you don't know what that is, and you don't know what a timeline is, but why the hell would you put it in your contract? Like, don't put it in writing if you don't know. Like, that's another thing. Like, don't overpromise things either. That's not trustworthy. As well too. Now let's segue then into the we talked about.
Hold on 1 second. 1 second. Because I do want to address something that along those same lines that I see in all of these Facebook groups. I think we talked about this last time. Like, I go in and I read this stuff, and sometimes I just shake my head. I just can't believe what I'm reading. But it's very, very common these days where you will see someone who's trying to either assign or they're otherwise, I'll just call it assigning. They're otherwise trying to sell their subject to deal that they've got under contract. And one of the things that I see that drives me bananas, it's become so normal for people to put these balloons in their subject to deals. And by balloon, what I mean is, they'll say, if you read the listing that these wholesalers have put out there, they'll say, X amount of quote entry fee, which is another term that really bothers me. But let's just keep it at that. They'll say, it's X amount for this entry fee, and then they'll list the terms of the loan that you're taking over, and inevitably, and probably 85% of them, it's a 5-year balloon. Yeah. You have to be so careful buying that deal simply because of that one term, just because of that there's a balloon in it. Mm-hmm. So, and if you really look at this, you really vet the numbers in that deal, you will see that a lot of these deals just don't have the equity. That's kind of the good thing about buying properties subject to, is we can buy properties with very little equity in them. But you have to be careful with that balloon, because if you do have that balloon, let's say it's a 5-year balloon. If in 5 years you don't have some of that equity paid down, like a big chunk of that equity paid down, I mean, you might as well have just gone out and bought a retail property. It doesn't make any sense to do that. Now you can, and the reason it doesn't make sense is because now you're going to refinance that property, more than likely. But you're still not going to have enough equity, and you just hope that it appraises for the amount that you're going to be able to refinance it for. I mean, I think it's crazy to put those balloons on there if you don't have to. And I'm not saying that those folks don't have to put those, like that was the deal that they struck. I just think it's become normal for people to offer, to say, like a wholesaler, for example, to say, hey, we'll pay on this for the next 3 to 5 years, or we'll pay on this for the next 5 years, and then we'll pay the loan off. And then they're gonna try and assign that deal to you, and you're just thinking, well, I've got 5 years. I mean, that's great. I've got 5 years to cash flow this thing, but you're not thinking that far ahead, or far enough ahead rather, where if you've got to pay that off, what kind of cash do you need to have to pay that off? Or is that thing going to appraise at a later date? Am I making any sense here? I think I feel like I'm kind of,
yeah, no, you're exactly right, because you're taking the terms and conditions that are being imposed on you. And I'd like to take that a step further too. Entry fee nonsense notwithstanding, right? I'm with you on the entry fee thing there. But that notwithstanding too, when you get a subject to deal from a wholesaler, first of all, it shouldn't be assigned, it should be novated. That's a whole separate issue. But secondly, what is their paperwork? I'm going to say probably, we'll go, you correct me if you think this is wrong, from being a pretty solid wholesaler over the, back in the day. But I'm going to say that probably 90% of the wholesalers aren't CYAing with the documents that we have and doing the subject to deal.
No.
So now are you going to, so now you're just inheriting all this paperwork. Is the paperwork good? Is it bad? Is it never? So first of all, I already know it's most likely not any good. So what does that mean? Am I going to be able now to come back in and put in some of those gaps and make sure that the seller understands really what's happening there? I think that the wholesale subject to deals are must be vetted, like the deal itself, the paperwork, and from the wholesaler, like that's a whole separate issue, right? And so I guess what we're saying, what I'm saying is, like, don't fall into that because you think it's such a good deal. Well, look at those numbers and all that stuff too. But if you're not covering your assets and the seller isn't made aware of what's really going here, guess who's going to have to deal with that? That's you, not the wholesaler. So you just have to be careful about stuff like that. So
I can tell you for sure that if I'm going to buy a subject to deal, I am going to, the wholesaler, I'm happy to do deals with wholesalers on these things. It's not a big deal. However, if I agree to take this wholesaler subject to deal, I need to be in direct contact with the seller. Like, I am middleman. Totally happy to pay that wholesaler. I have to be in direct contact with them, because that's really the only way that I can ensure that this is done the correct way, and that I'm not, like you're saying, like inheriting some really shitty or shoddy paperwork, that I don't necessarily, that I wouldn't necessarily agree with. And on top of that, now I've got my own subject to kind of closing package that I send to the title company. Now it may occur that the seller shows up to closing, and now they've got all this other paperwork to sign that I'm going to give, and it just I think it could be really confusing. It's already a confusing time for them. If I'm going to buy a deal from a wholesaler, I need to be in direct contact with the seller. I am happy to sign an agreement outside of the deal, but thank you, Mr. Wholesaler, for bringing me the deal. I'm going to pay you. I'll sign your contract to pay you. You can send that to the title company, but I have to talk to the seller directly. I have to deal with them directly. So now I know a lot of folks that don't do that.
Yeah, for sure. And that's why the subject to and the investors dealing with the subject to get a bad name, And I'm just saying the wholesalers just doing their wholesale thing, right? Like they may not have an understanding that needs to be in there so that the seller, on a subject to deal, like, it's just a lack of knowledge thing, which probably says they shouldn't be doing that, but that's a whole separate issue. But yeah, I mean, you just have to be very careful about doing it again, just doing it properly, right? We
Yep.
say so much to us, where's the integrity today? Well, at least it's sitting right here with the two of us. At least we can say that, right? I can sleep well at night and say that with 100% certainty. So that's how we deal with the sellers. But just the last thing to kind of wrap up today's episode on the mistakes is exit strategy. And along with the exit strategy, let's just, before we parlay into, know your exit strategy, what are you doing with this? And again, Jeff mentioned you might not know a year from now or 5 years from now too, but you should have some plan of what you're going to do, buy and hold for this. But I'd also like to vet too. Another very common mistake, whether it's subject to or whether it's a regular deal, is you may have to make sure you do your due diligence on the property. Like, make sure you understand, like, and you inspect or bring your people in there or you inspect the property. Like, make sure you're not getting a lemon, right? Their house lemons, like, it's very visual. It's usually easy to see the house lemons, but sometimes not so much. You gotta have to get up in the attic, maybe, right? Maybe you have to
Yeah.
go in the crawl space. Like, I mean, you have to do your due diligence on the property to make sure that you're not being taken there too, and what you're paying is appropriate, and that goes along with your exit strategy. So talk about the exit strategy. Why is it important to know what you're going to do? How are you going to disposition that property in the end, Mr. Coffman?
Yeah, I think there's two trains of thought on this. One is a lot of folks like to have their exit like right up front, like they want to get this deal, they want to buy this subject to deal, they already have the exit strategy figured out, and it's got to fit in this little box. I do not care for um, that particular practice. I like to look at a deal for just for what's on the surface. I like to look at a deal and go, does this deal make sense? Because I know that I can custom tailor an exit strategy. Now, there's a lot of folks out there that just don't know what these other alternative or kind of creative exit strategies are, and so they're going to be kind of trapped in this little box. I think by trying to have that completely figured out all up front puts people in analysis paralysis, and it can prevent it did me. That's the only reason I can say this with confidence, is that it puts you in analysis paralysis, where if you don't fit this certain mold, you might just not buy that deal. And so I guess this is really where kind of a good, if you're not really well versed in creative finance, this is where a really good coach or a really good mentor can help you out, because a lot of times what we do is we compartmentalize these different both acquisitions and disposition strategies, and we don't really look at the bigger picture. Like, I don't have specifically, like, everyone knows I'm a huge fan of seller finance. I love seller finance. It's my jam. That doesn't mean that I won't own a rental. Doesn't mean that I wouldn't do a lease option, although it's probably not going to happen. Doesn't mean that I wouldn't do a flip. You know what I mean? Doesn't mean that I wouldn't sell a property as is to a landlord. There's all kinds of different exit strategies out there. But as it relates to what we're talking about here, and the question that Ken asked was, where do you draw that line on figuring out what your exit strategy is going to be? I would say evaluate the deal, see if it's a good deal. Don't get yourself all wrapped up in how you're gonna dispo that deal, but have an idea, and you will know this with experience. You will understand that when you go look at a house, you look at its condition, you will have a basic understanding about what the possibilities of the exit strategies are for you.
Right.
And
right.
And that's where I lie. I don't like to put myself in a corner and say, hey, this has got to fit this mold. And I guess really that just comes with a little bit of experience. Because I've definitely sat in rooms with folks who they are just die hard, like they, I want to be able, like, particularly the some of the folks who learn. Well, I'm not going to pick on that group because this happens a lot in a lot of other groups. But one of the groups I was in recently was note buyers. I'm sorry, note sellers. They were going out and they were buying properties subject to, and they were creating a couple of notes. We know this whole thing, and then they would try and solve it. But they would try and sell off one of those notes, and then they would have this other note that would just be hanging out there and they could collect on it for forever. But these folks were so die hard that this is the type of deal that they wanted to do, that they ended up missing out on like 2 or 3 deals. It doesn't make any sense to me. It doesn't make any sense. You can still get that deal done without being, backed into a corner and having to comply with some type of preconceived exit strategy. That's just my take on it. What about you?
Yeah, well, I think that's right, but I also would say this: when you're a new real estate investor, when you're trying to come in and you're doing something, I think I think picking. We're talking about lanes. We'll bring it full circle back to when we started. I think picking a lane, a channel, a box, whatever you want to call that, is the right thing to do to start.
Mm-hmm.
And master that. Now, that's not to say that if there's some smoking hot deal that smacks you in the face that you don't do it. Like, we never do that too. But then I think the experience comes now that we've done, right, between us, hundreds of deals at this point over the years and years now. Like, we're more comfortable when you say, okay, I'm going to get this house. Here are my 3 options to acquire it to the seller. And oh, by the way, here are my 3 probably best disposition strategies. And I'm not going to worry about that until I get the thing under contract. Like, that comes after your first 50 deals, right? It doesn't come on your first deal. I would say,
that's a good point.
Yes, that's true. But pick a lane, just like the marketing, like pick 2 or 3 things that you want to focus on and then go after. Right. Yep. And so subject to, when we talk about subject to, it's an acquisition strategy. That's what it is. And so it's a great acquisition strategy, but it's not the only acquisition strategy. Right. And so after years of doing this, we can say, okay, this one's probably good sub 2. This one's not. This one, we're going to have to do something different on this one. Like, we have that understanding. And that's why I think what you said is really important. Like, when you can partner or learn from somebody that has that experience, it just helps you all the more realize that. Like, when you're starting, let's focus on this. Then we'll start adding these other things in there. And I think that's, as a beginner, what you said is exactly right. Nail it, then scale it. What you said is exactly right too, though, Jeff. You learn how to do what's right for you and your business. But if you don't know what you want to do with your business, then that's a difficult thing to figure out, right? So you have to start with some of the basics first, I think. Focus on that, and then start, and then you add things in. Like, you always have to try to diversify. There's lots of things to do in real estate. There's lots of different channels, lanes, whatever you want to call them, in real estate to make money. What do you want to do, right? One of the things we like to do is be creative, right? Subject to acquisition, seller finance, get it on seller financing, all those sorts of things. That's kind of the niche, but there's lots of different lanes inside that niche as well. So I was saying, sorry, I got on a little soapbox there, I guess, what you asked.
That's okay.
You asked
I
me,
brought up,
so that's
yeah.
what you.
Yeah, I brought up Nail It and Scale It because that's the concept behind that book. Nathan Furr and Paul Ahlstrom are the authors on that book. But yeah, that is exactly that book. That book's kind of embedded in my mind because I am a big systems guy, and so I think you're correct in that. I guess it just depends. It's going to depend upon your experience level, and it just nail like the book says, nail it. Nail one channel, you can scale that channel, and then you move on to the next. And but yeah, I think it's just a matter of experience. If you've got It only took me, I will tell you this, it only took me doing probably a dozen lease options to know that lease options are not my jam. you know,
Oh,
so
they're good
I
though.
mean,
They
I
have their
guess that,
place, right? It's a good channel. Yeah,
yeah.
it's a good channel or lane, just not your
Do
lane.
they though?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I don't know. We
We
can
can do it
argue about
much
that all day.
better, right?
Yeah,
There's a
yeah.
much better way. That's correct. Yeah. Yeah.
Right, right. So yeah, I don't know. What else do we have? We have anything else? Do you have anything else on your
That's it.
list here?
We covered it. Yeah. No, we covered it.
Okay.
We think those are the pre now, we can granularly get down into other things too, but I think that's probably pretty much going to cover us for today's episode.
All right. Um, guys, I threw up there the. In fact, I'll throw it up one more time, since we're talking about subject to, and a large portion of this was about was about setting these up correctly from the get go. Uh, our complete subject to documents package is it's literally the exact same packages. Anytime I buy a subject to deal, I'm going to put this thing together.
Yep.
That package then gets sent over to my title company, where everything is anything that needs to have signatures notarized gets notarized. Everything gets done through the title company, and this is I mean, I've been using this package for years. We've actually added since you came on board, we've actually added some really really good disclosures in there. All this stuff has been vetted, and it's to my knowledge, this is I could be stepping on my own foot here a little bit, but everything in this 50, because this is really all all private documentation. It's disclosures. It's a lot of items that the only thing that ever gets recorded in any one of these deals is going to be the deed, which you would probably that's going to be a state specific thing, actually a county specific document that gets recorded. The rest of these are all the rest of the documents in this package is all it's all for the benefit of the seller and for the benefit of you, of protecting you. Very very thorough documents package. There are other options out there for. I mean, you could go out to one of the places that I used to like to go when I was a younger investor was I used to go to deeds.com. They have a lot of good stuff out there. You're not going to find it. You're not going to find as good of a deal like this, and they definitely don't have the disclosures. And I think that if we go back to the beginning of our conversation, we talk about integrity and having full transparency, full disclosure with folks. This documents package has all of that. So, if it goes to the title company, seller signs off on it, seller gets a copy of all those, you get a copy of all those documents, and everything is out in the open. It's a beautiful, beautiful thing. All right, guys, that is all I have. Ken, do you have anything you want to add?
No, I think that's it. We'll be back for to part 3 of 3 next week, and we'll talk a little bit more subject to. And otherwise, everyone have a great week.